So we're going to start off on this course, during which I hope that you will acquire a number of devices and techniques to improve your writing within the context of writing up your research results. As you know from the introduction to this course, the course was designed within the context of teaching English as a foreign language. The idea is to help researchers for whom English is a second or a foreign language to overcome that extra obstacle of writing in a foreign language. The course is based on a study in which we analysed a number of texts that had been edited for publication and a study of different sources to try to identify the most crucial points that need to be addressed and therefore create a practical course that will help you to hone in on the specific questions for improvement. Okay? And so to just start off with, the course structure is as follows. We start off by looking at a section of typical paper. We are going to deal with the sections in the order that they appear, even though this would not be the order in which you would write, okay? We're going to look at the content, advice and focus of each section, and then take real life examples that we have taken from papers that have been edited, obviously changing a few details for reasons of privacy, okay? And looking at the language aspects to see how we could streamline, which is very important because we want to try to create clear, concise messages, and then the structure, the grammar and the style to see how we can improve these texts. And then you will have ample opportunity for practicing this through different tasks, some of which include your own writing, okay? So, as I said, this is module 1, where we're just going to be looking at effective writing in general and have a kind of overview of the course. As I said, each module will have a look at a different section in the paper, and within that, obviously, different language aspects. You will be able to see that in the content table that you have. And also, we'll have a look at other useful language and streamlining, editing exercises, and end up with a writer's workshop where we will put everything that we have learned into practice to carry out a writing exercise. All the tasks that you will do, you should hand in through the online platform so that I can provide feedback on your work. Okay? So let's have a look at this. In this module, we're going to look at the principles of effective writing, the steps in the writing process. In this module, we're going to have a look at this question of tenses. Just a very brief look at peer review. And then there are a few tasks, okay? As I said, we'll carry out a few tasks during this video session as way of example, but you have more tasks that you can carry out and hand in for practice, okay? So just to start off with, as I said, this course was conceived within the context of English as a foreign language. And therefore, one issue that we need to have a look at just to begin very briefly is this question of translation pitfalls. Okay, obviously at this stage in your research career, I do not expect any of you to be writing in your language and then translating into English. However, it is very difficult not to do this in your head, okay? So I just took a couple of examples, one in Spanish, one in French, to show you that sometimes the other language, in this case English, is radically different, okay? So here we have an example in Spanish of a sentence taken from the Underground, where it's telling you to be careful not to put your foot in that space or that gap between the train and the platform. Okay, and this is exactly how they say it on the train. If you are on the Underground in Spain, you will hear this sentence. Okay, al salir, tenga cuidado de no introducir el pie entre coche y andén. And in English, how do we say that? In English, we say mind the gap. Okay, and that's what you're going to hear. So this is just an example of how the different languages can be radically different, and we have to try and move away from our own language into the foreign language, in this case English, and take on the standard norms of discourse, not only of that language, but also in this case of scientific writing, of what is expected, the norms of a standard discourse for reporting our research results. Here is another example in French, and again we say that we can see that in English we say clockwise in one word rather than a number of words that is required in French. Obviously this is not the same in all languages. I believe, although I haven't studied it, that German works the other way around, and in fact the German is even more concise than the English, okay? But it's just to point out that these differences do exist and they can be considerable, and therefore we have to try to set aside our own language and move into the other language and to try to adopt the norms, okay? When we write academically, we tend to think that a lot of words are necessary, okay? And this is not the case. What we are going to try to do in this course is to create clear and concise messages to get our message across in as few words as possible, and to do away with, get rid of, eliminate these unnecessary words and these verbose or pedantic styles that we often adopt, okay? So I have chosen an example. This, as I say, is a real example taken from a paper that was submitted for edition, okay? And you can see that it's about dendrification and about mathematical modeling techniques, okay? And if we read it, we see that it says, our study emphasizes the significance of hotspots and incubation processes in the measurement of dendrification processes. It is clear that further studies are needed to develop spatial modeling because conflicting controlling factors have been found. Furthermore, due to the intrinsic difficulties to spatially measure dendrification posed by the incubation process and hotspots, it is indispensable to employ new modeling techniques. Here we develop a mathematical model to overcome this problem. Okay, so we can see that this is very wordy, okay? And if we try to highlight the keywords, let's say the keywords, start off there, it might be easy. We will see that we start off quite well. Our study emphasizes the significance of hotspots and incubation processes in the measurement of gentrification processes, though we have processes and processes, okay? It is clear that further studies are needed to develop spatial modeling because conflicting controlling factors have been found. So far, more or less so good. But then all of a sudden here we have a lot of repetition, which is totally unnecessary. And finally, we have an explanation of what we are doing, that we are going to develop a new mathematical model to overcome these problems that are associated with this. Okay, so this is an example of being lost in the forest. Okay, we say that you can't see the forest for the trees, or maybe that we can't see the trees for the forest. I'm not sure what would be true, but there is an awful lot of background noise in this text. Okay, there is a lot of background noise that prevents us from seeing the main messages. The main messages are lost in a lot of unnecessary wordiness and repetition. So in this course, what we're going to try to do is to simplify, to eliminate unnecessary words and wordiness, to try not to be repetitive, okay, except in specific circumstances or cases where we want to drive home a main message, where we could repeat something at the beginning and at the end, to create clear and concise messages. So if we extract or tease out the main messages or the main points of this confused and verbose text, we propose a novel mathematical modeling technique to spatially measure gentrification. Easy, clear, short sentence. And second sentence, this method overcomes the intrinsic difficulties posed by the incubation process and hotspots, which give rise to conflicting controlling factors. So I would like you to think, for example, how you would convey your research results through a poster, for example. This is a good place maybe to start, to try to minimize or to synthesize our main messages into as few words as possible and create short, simple texts to get our ideas across effectively and clearly. Okay? All right. So the main points that we have found through discourse analysis and through a study that we carried out were these main principles of effective writing, okay? And as I've said, to write concisely, to be brief, to avoid jargon as far as possible, and needless wordiness. We should avoid overlong sentences, keep structure simple, okay? You know what it's like when you have to read papers and the writer has written in a very difficult way, a very complicated, and you know, we start kind of skipping things because it's so boring. So we don't want to do that. We're going to keep our structure simple. We're going to avoid interrupting the main clause. Okay, we're going to see this thing of dependent clauses and try to avoid these very long sentences with a lot of different clauses. I know that in English we like to use noun strings. Oh, sorry, no, here it's to avoid the overuse of nouns, okay? The identification of, the investigation of, rather we're going to try to use verbs. We're going to be doing a lot of work on this. To avoid overlong paragraphs, and to try to achieve flow by good organization and the use of discourse markers. Okay, sometimes the reviewers come back and say improve flow, and you say, okay, what's this? How can I improve flow? Okay, so we're going to see how we can do that by, number one, organizing our ideas properly, and number two, using discourse markers. Also, there are a number of words that we have to be careful with, because perhaps they are false friends, or because perhaps they have a specific usage in our field of study. To avoid long strings of qualifiers in front of a noun, okay, we tend to do this in English. Sometimes it can be very useful, especially in figure legends or in titles, but sometimes in the text itself it can create confusion. The use of parallel constructions and tenses, okay, often you find that you are changing the tenses because the tenses have a specific use. We have to be careful with this. Once something is published, it is considered as a fact until someone comes along and proves otherwise, and therefore we use the present tense for facts. And for our own results, which as yet are unpublished, we have to use the past tense to describe what we did, what we found, okay? We're going to look at that in more detail now, in fact, in this module. And also these kind of passive constructions, it has been determined, it has been found, it has been shown, where we have these structures beginning with it, which are very clumsy and very bad in terms of style. Okay, so we're going to be looking at all of these things little by little, step by step, and carrying out exercises to practice them. So hopefully by the end of this course, you will have acquired these into your style, into your own writing style, and to have dominated these skills, and to be able to write more effectively, efficiently, concisely, and to be more aware of all of these points and take them on board. Okay, so in summary, what is good writing? Okay, communicate an idea clearly, focus on your main messages, make them stand out, okay, concisely, in as few words as possible, and effectively in a nice style that is reader friendly, that flows well, okay, with clear messages again. And we are going to try to employ all the steps in the writing process. We are not going to skip any steps, and that's what we're going to have a look at now, okay? So, the steps in the writing process. There are three main steps. Obviously, the first is the pre-writing, where we're going to be planning, we're going to be analysing our task. Obviously, in the case of our research results, we are going to be deciding on the scope, okay, what we are going to include, what we are not going to include, okay. We can be using some concept maps, outlines, okay, and to put things into context. This is a very laborious task. It is the most difficult step of all. That getting started, right, is difficult. Then, if we do this first step properly, step 2, which is the drafting, is much easier, okay? And this is where we actually write sentences, paragraphs. We're not going to worry at this point about our style and our grammar. We're just going to use that step 1 to write full sentences for our step 2. And then step 3, we should create a space before we embark upon step 3, where we take our step 2 and we reread it and we edit, we streamline. And this is where this course should come in handy to help you with this third step especially, okay? Because you are going to check the style, the grammar, the tone, the vocabulary, okay? And I hope that this course will provide you with some helpful guidelines to carry out this third step, okay, and come up with a polished text. So the question is, proportionally, how much time do you spend on each of these steps? Or do you skip any of these steps, okay? How much time do you spend on pre-writing, on brainstorming, outlining, drafting, deciding on your scope? How much do you spend on just writing? And how much time do you spend on your revision, okay? All right. Obviously, you are, I assume, doing this together with your team, with your supervisor, with other researchers, okay? But try to say what percentage of your time do you spend, like 80% on step 2 on writing and 10 on pre-writing and 10 on revision? Do you skip any of the steps? Maybe you could write that down. So what do the experts say? Well, you will find different, as always, different opinions. But I go with this one, where the pre-writing should be at least 40%. The writing of the first draft, perhaps 20, a bit more, depending on your experience and your level, maybe. And the revision, another 40%. Okay. Could we change this? Yes, of course, as I've said, that there is different advice, but more or less the advice says that step 1 and 3 should be more than step 2. Okay, and the idea is that the more time you spend on this step, the less time you will spend on this one. And the third step, which is kind of polishing, is what is going to give you a nice polished text. Okay, so the order, as I said in this course, for simplicity's sake, I have followed the order of the research article, okay? But this is not the order in which you are going to write, obviously. Now, you could choose to write up the materials and the methods or the results first, okay? Obviously, the materials and methods are the simplest if you have followed some standard protocols. And perhaps this is a good place for you to start, okay? And obviously the results, the figures and the tables are the basis, they are the foundation of your paper, and therefore this could also be a good place to start, okay? So we are going to start with one of these 2 sections, and then once these have been written up, the introduction, because this could be a little laborious in terms of finding information, although what we must remember is that the introduction should not be very long. It should be between 3 and 5 paragraphs at most. We're going to be having a look at this. Remember that your peers are already well versed in your area of research. They are probably familiar with all of the background, and therefore we want to keep this to a minimum and to try to limit it to our specific study, okay? The discussion, the 4th step. This is obviously, as you know, if you have already written a research paper, the most difficult to write and will take considerable time. In language terms, it is also the most complex, okay, because we are comparing others' findings with our own findings. We are interpreting our results and the meaning thereof, okay? And finally, last step, the abstract, okay, the keyword and the title. And I saw something interesting the other day. Apparently, shorter titles receive more reads than long titles. It seems that long titles scare people off. So that might be something to bear in mind when you are choosing the title. Okay, something short and nice and natty. Okay. All right. So if I'm going too fast, please pause the video. I'm going to be asking you to pause the video later anyway, but as I say, if I'm going a little too fast for you, you can of course pause the video, which is one of the advantages of this teaching format, and rewind and re-listen. Okay. So this question of tenses. This actually even can cause confusion with native speakers of what's what. Okay. Here I've drawn up a table. In fact, I've drawn up a few tables, this one and on the next slides too. All right, the first one is very general and it's looking in terms of tenses, the past. We will use the past when we discuss results that cannot be generalized. So even if they are referring to another study, if they are specific, Brown reported that 53% of samples in her study were affected. Okay, this is something very specific. We'll use the past tense. Also to talk about unpublished results, in other words, ours. In our study, 75% of the inoculated rabbits survived. And the present to talk about established facts and published results. So, for example, this virus spreads quickly. It's a fact. And also to describe figures, tables, and graphs. So we say table 2 shows that our results point to a decline in this tendency. Okay, all right. Then, what else related to the tenses? Here we go by section, all right? So the abstract, the summary, we have said that we will use the present to provide the background of what is known, the established facts, and the past to refer to our own study. In the introduction, obviously, we will be using the present and present perfect to outline the general topic and state what is already known. We might be using the present continuous and the future to describe trends. And the present perfect and past to refer to our own particular study. Okay. The material and methods. We will use the past, obviously, because we are describing what we did, what we observed, and what we found. And as we said before, the discussion will be more complex because we are going to be using all the tenses, the past, the present, modal verbs, future tenses, conditionals, okay? Because we're comparing our findings with others' results, we are maybe speculating as to the significance or the meaning and extension of, you know, this to future studies or the implications, okay, of our findings, okay? So this is a table just as a kind of guide. Obviously in the course we're going to be looking at each section in detail and then we will come back to this, but this is kind of introduction to tenses. Then just some kind of grammar points to take into consideration here. So sometimes there is a little confusion between the past tense and the present perfect, okay? So perhaps you already know this, but I thought that I would draw up a little table for clarification, because the idea of this course also is for you to have like a handbook that you can refer to. So the present perfect tense is appropriate for repeated or continuous observations. And the past tense rather refers to past tense or a past event. So for example, in our study, in previous studies, ago, last, in 1964, okay, we will use the past tense. Whereas the present perfect, when the time is kind of unfinished, or it continues up to the future. So since, for, yet, already, once, twice, three times, to date, until now, so far, recently, lately, and just, and unfinished time, for example, this year. Okay, so here you have a table for your reference, okay? And just to hone in a little bit and look at some points that are often confusing, that we have found are often confused, the difference between since and for. If you remember, we use since before a time point in the past. So for example, before a date, a year, or a month. They have been following this research line since 1987, okay? So this is continuous up until the present, since this moment in the past, okay? Whereas for refers to the period of time, so we will speak in terms of years, months, hours, okay? We have been studying this aspect for 6 years, okay? So this sometimes creates confusion. Then this question of for or during, okay? For is used, as we've seen, for a period of time, 3 years, 9 months. So I've been working here for 3 years. The experimental period will last for 9 months. Whereas during is followed by a noun. So we took readings during the experiment. And I wrote 3 papers during my stay in the USA. Okay, so just highlighting these points that sometimes cause confusion. You have all of this information in your handouts that you can refer to. Then while. While is similar to during, but the structure is different, okay? So I wrote 3 papers while I was staying in the USA, okay? So it is not correct to say during 3 years or during 6 months. We would say during the whole experiment or throughout the experiment. And throughout can also be used to describe the whole space, okay? So it could be for time or for space. Samples were taken throughout the country. In other words, from all over the country, or country-wide, worldwide, country-wide. Okay, and along is used to talk about space, not time, all right? We don't say along the experiment, something that I correct many times. We can say along the river or along the riverbank. Okay, so as I say, just a little, a few points of reference for you to have there in case you have doubts. Now, the peer review, this is just a very brief little point here. I don't know if any of you have ever participated in a peer review, but it's quite interesting to know what kind of questions the reviewers are faced with, what kind of questions they have to answer, or what kind of points they have to look out for. Okay, so I have taken one from the Journal of Analytical Atomic Spectrometry as an example, but well, probably many of the questions could be applicable to other journals, all right? And obviously it's a good idea to go into the journal's guidelines when you want to submit a paper to that journal, and also find out as much information as possible to get things right and to avoid hold-ups or delays later on, okay? So is there sufficient novelty and quality of scientific content? Are there any previous publications to which the author should be directed? Does the title adequately reflect the content? Okay, as I said here, we want to try to go for short titles, so it might be quite difficult to reach some compromise, but well, we should bear that in mind. 4, are the objectives and salient features and quantitative information adequately stated in the abstract? Often this depends very much on the journal you are publishing in, because some journals require the abstract to be like a mini paper, even with like mini subheadings. So, you know, that depends a great deal on where you are wanting to publish. 5, are the main analyses, matrices, techniques, and or concepts described by the keywords important in this digital age? You know, where we have to try to identify our keywords for anything and everything, so that people can find us in that, talk about the, not see the forest for the trees in this huge web in which we now live in the virtual world. Okay, so that's very important. Does the introduction adequately relate the current investigation to previous relevant studies? Okay, so that would be in that first step of our writing, where we have to try to define the focus, the scope, and the context of our study. Are the results clearly given with adequate statistics, validation methods? Is the conclusion necessary and not duplicating statements made in the discussion? Sometimes there is no conclusion, sometimes it's kind of discussion and conclusion, right? And is there a balance between length and content? Okay, please, let's not write something over the top, something that is verbose with a lot of unnecessary words, a lot of unnecessary padding of this unnecessary information. Okay, all right. So as I say, whatever your field, whatever journal it is you want to publish in, you need to go there, you need to have a good look at the kind of things that they provide in their guidelines, and if at all possible, the peer review process. Okay. So now we come on to a few tasks. As I said at the beginning, during these video sessions, there are just a few tasks as way of example, and then you have a number of tasks for you to carry out and to hand in through the platform. Okay, so you have a lot more opportunity for practicing everything that we have looked at. Okay, so we were looking at these this question of for, since, during, throughout, along. Okay, and here we have some tasks, and I would like you in these tasks to pause the video, okay, because in these tasks in the video I do provide the answers, so don't cheat, please. Pause the video. You should download the tasks onto your computer and to fill them in, okay, and then you can continue with the video to have a look at the official answers, so to speak. So please pause the video. Okay, so I'm assuming you have had time to do that, and let's have a look at the suggested answers. Samples were taken during the summer months or throughout the summer months. Both would be possible. Samples were collected along the coast. If you remember, we said that for this geographic space, we would use along. The editor did not answer me for 3 months. Let's hope it's not true. We have been studying its development since it first appeared in 1987. Okay, this is one specific point in the past. And the number and type of pollinators were recorded during or throughout the spring. Okay, so again, you can pause the video. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to write to us to ask for clarification. If you have a different answer and you want to ask if it was okay, just write to us. Now, the others, it says some of these sentences are wrong. Correct those that are wrong. Okay, so again, please pause the video, have a look at these sentences, decide which are right, which are wrong, and correct those that are wrong. So I assume that you have paused the video, you have carried out the exercise. This was observed 3 times to date. No, because we have already seen that 3 times to date should be used with the present perfect. This has been observed 3 times to date. Samples were taken along the summer months. Again, we saw that this is not correct. It should be during or throughout the summer months. This phenomenon has recently been recorded in Sweden. Recently has been is correct. We said that the present perfect is used with recently. 4. Our samples are incubated during 5 hours at 37 degrees and then growth is recorded. Of course, this is incorrect. We are talking about our study, our results, and therefore we should be using the past tense. Our samples were incubated for 5 hours at 37 degrees, then growth was recorded. Okay, so again, we need to make a number of changes to number 4. And finally, the pest population grew during treatment with BGNS is okay, because we are describing what happened during our experiment. Okay, so that is that task. And we have another task here. Again, please pause the video. I'm going to reduce this a little bit so you can see the text, even though you have it on your computer. Okay, please pause the text and carry out this exercise. Okay, so let's have a look at what you have done. And here we have viroids are the only kind of subviral pathogens with a well-defined molecular structure. Since their discovery some 25 years ago, many researchers have attempted to define the agents inciting infectious disease. Single-stranded RNA viroids are the smallest known RNA virus and represent the lowest step in the biological scale. The tobacco mosaic virus was discovered over a century ago, and numerous viruses affecting animal cells have been found since then. Viroids, however, appear to be restricted to the plant kingdom. In this study, we analyzed numerous strains isolated from the field. Okay, all right. So I think that we have another one, text B. All right, it carries on about the viroids. So please pause the video and carry out this task, and then turn on again to check your answers. Okay, so let's have a look and see what you have done and see if it coincides with my answers. To date, 27 viroid species have been sequenced. See Table 1. Comparative analyses revealed that some structural motifs have been conserved. So probably they are involved with vital functions. Until now, a number of host plants have been studied, showing that most viroids affect dicotyledons. In our experiments, however, we have shown that CTVD was able to infect monocotyledons under controlled lab conditions. Okay, so you can pause the video and check, and if you have some differences in criteria, please let me know, and we'll see if you know, your solution is actually okay. All right, but these are the recommended solutions to this task. So, as I say, you have more exercises like these to do in your tasks to give you more practice. And thank you for your attention in this first module. And I hope to see you for module 2. Bye for now.